Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. This is Sarah Hackney with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, and we are just about ready to get started here on Tuesday afternoon. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on this rescheduled webinar. We did a little schedule shuffling due to Hurricane Irma, so we hope everyone's okay and is back in power and back at their desks or on the farm as they want to be right now. You'll see we did not update the date. It is, in fact, September 26th, and you are here for part 3 of a 4-part webinar series partnership between the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition and the Southern Sustainable Agriculture Working Group. I'm really pleased today to have Gabrielle Lane from Southern SAWG joining us and tag teaming with me on this presentation and some of the interactive components. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump right in, but first a brief couple of housekeeping notes. First is this webinar is being recorded, so if for any reason you need to leave early or you want to share it with colleagues, we'll make sure that link is sent around within a few days after the webinar. You should also receive a survey, an evaluation survey at the close of the webinar. We really welcome your feedback, and it will help us shape future efforts and future educational offerings that we put out. And finally, everyone is set up in listen-only mode. That means that helps us keep any sort of background noise or distraction down. We absolutely do welcome your questions. Please feel free at any time to drop them into the participant feedback box. There's a Q&A section. You're welcome to place them in there. If we can answer them easily on the fly, we will. And if we don't have time, we'll make sure to get to them at the end when we have some time set aside for questions. So again, please feel free to put those in. If we're not able to take them immediately, please know that we'll notice them and we'll take them at the end. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and jump right in. What are we talking about today? Hopefully you're in the right place at the right time. This again is part 3 of a 4-part series on the Farm Bill. Today we're talking about advocacy. And then this is sort of the 3rd piece, and then the 4th piece coming up in a few weeks is going to be a little bit more of a discussion-based listening session. I'll note here, if you missed either of the first part 1 or part 2 in this series, they have been recorded and they are available on the Southern SAWG website, and you're welcome to view them at any time. What are we going to cover today? First, let me mention what we're not going to cover. Because we've spent the first 2 webinars doing a deep Farm Bill dive on kind of what is it, what's in it, how does the sausage get made. We're not going to go deep onto that sort of policy side of the coin today. But again, you're welcome to view those if you missed them prior. And if you have questions along those lines, we'll do our best to help out and pitch it if we need to. What are we going to cover today? We're going to do just a very brief about NSAC and Southern SAWG for anyone who's new to us. And then we'll break our kind of discussion and education down into a couple of key areas. We're going to start with how to listen to and learn about your members of Congress. From there, how to educate them about issues and programs and policies that matter to you. Then really importantly, once you've done that, how to ask your members of Congress to do the right thing. And then finally and importantly, we'll talk through some specific kinds of actions you can take on the 2018 Farm Bill that are worth your time and that will help you have an impact and be heard. We'll make sure as well for some time for Q&A. And I hear that I've got a comment here that someone says they cannot hear. So if you can't hear, you probably can't hear me talking, so we'll try to take care of that in the chat box. But if you are having any audio issues, if it's not coming in clear for you, I'll put this in the chat box too, but sometimes it helps to try dialing in from your phone, or if you're on your phone and it's not working, try dialing in with a computer audio. Both of those options are available for this webinar, so hopefully one of those will work for you. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Gabrielle to do a little brief intro of Southern SAWG. All right, here we go.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Gabrielle Lane, and I am the Policy Coordinator for Southern SAWG. And before we jump into the webinar, I want to give you a brief introduction about Southern SAWG. The Southern Sustainable Agriculture Working Group began in 1991 when 25 folks from 17 organizations across the South came together at the Highlander Center in New Market, Tennessee. Their purpose was to give Southerners a greater voice in how Southern agriculture and rural problems were solved, and to give farmers a leadership role in making Southern agriculture more sustainable. Since those early days, the organization has partnered with hundreds of organizations and thousands of farmers and individuals across 13 states. And if you can change the slide. So Southern SAWG's mission is to empower and inspire farmers, individuals, and communities in the South to create an agricultural system that is environmentally sound, economically viable, socially just, and humane. And because sustainable solutions depend on the involvement of the entire community, Southern SAWG is committed to including all persons of the South without bias. Southern SAWG has three primary program areas: sustainable, successful farmers, community food systems, and bringing the Southern voice to nationwide farm policy dialogue. This last program area is, of course, why we are working with NSAC on this Farm Bill webinar series. And if you can change the slide, please. Southern SAWG intends to do some follow-up from this webinar series at our 27th annual conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee next January. And we hope you will consider joining us with over 1,200 farmers and farmer advocates at this one-of-a-kind conference. You'll find outstanding practical information and amazing networking that I am confident will assist you or your farm in your work. The conference program will be online in early October at southernsawg.org, and that is SSAWG.org. Thank you so much. And Sarah, back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gabrielle. We're looking forward to hearing from you when we get to our polls coming up here soon. Thanks again. And yeah, NSAC really loves working with Southern SAWG as a partner. And just for a minute, I'll do a quick intro about us. Who are we and what's going on? So NSAC is a DC-based grassroots alliance of over 100 organizations from all around the country who come together because they realize that they really want to work on federal food and farm policy and have a voice in Washington, D.C. Southern SAWG is one of those members, as are many, many other super fantastic organizations both in the South and across the country. We've been around for 30 years, and you can see that's me in the picture, little tiny me, at one of our meetings in Iowa a couple years ago. I'm Sarah. I'm the grassroots director here, and part of my job is helping make sure folks like you are up to date on what's happening in D.C. and have opportunities to be involved and have your voice heard. So this is part of our mission and our work today. Just a little bit about how we work. Everything that we do comes from farmers and with them, or sort of through them, through our member groups. So it doesn't matter what I here in D.C. think is important for farmers or for communities. It's what you think. There are processes in place for our member groups to be listening to and checking in with the farmers and communities they serve and bringing those issues, those ideas, those solutions to us as a coalition. Together, we work together to say, okay, how are we going to prioritize what to work on and what are we going to work on together? Then as a coalition, we do that work. We campaign to win. We take those asks to Congress, to federal agencies, and try to build, through policy, a more sustainable food and farm system. So that's just a quick bit about how we work. The key take home here is that we want to hear from you and that we believe that you have a role in helping make this happen. Awesome. A couple of quick terminology bits here before we jump in on the advocacy details. You probably hear these words a lot if you're reading about policy, and I like to try to make sure we define them. If you joined our first two webinars, you may have heard me do this before, but just in case for any first-timers, we'll do it again here. What you see on the slide in front of you are five key pieces to policy making in Washington, D.C. We're going to focus today on primarily the two in the green box, what are called authorization and appropriation. Those are really just fancy words for writing a bill and funding components of the government. When we think about advocacy, when we think about the Farm Bill, most people think about these two things. They think about What's in the bill that Congress is writing? What are they authorizing? And how are they going to spend their money? So when you hear people say the Farm Bill is being reauthorized, they simply mean it's about to be rewritten. This doesn't mean Congress is going to rewrite every word. They'll actually just keep some of it writ whole. They'll make some changes. They'll add some things. They'll remove some things. So when we talk about advocacy today, we'll be largely talking about things that grassroots advocates like you can do during what we call the authorization process, or how a bill becomes a law. Go into committee, the floor, all that fun stuff. We'll talk more about that once we get into it. I'll mention as well again, appropriations is simply making decisions about how to spend taxpayer dollars, where to appropriate funding. And then I'll just mention again quickly, implementation. While we won't focus as much on it today, it's a really important piece of the process. And that's, once that bill is passed, our work is not done. We still do advocacy. We still do work during the phase between during that time when Congress has passed a bill and it's gone over to USDA to be implemented on the ground. All right, why does my advocacy matter? Well, if you're on the webinar today, hopefully you get it. It's important. And if you're already there, you're pretty much most of the way there. In short, the shortest way to say why does this matter is, if you're not speaking up for yourself and for the issues that you believe in, we can guarantee you that someone else is speaking for you, or your issues may not be being heard at all here in Washington. Policy sets a lot of the rules of the road for our food and farm system. So advocating for changes to policy is one way, a really effective way to improve our food and farm system, to build more sustainable future. It is by means not the only way, and you don't have to do it full time, but it's a really powerful way. It's also a complement. If you're already doing work in communities, maybe you work for a nonprofit, you're a farmer, whatever your role is in the community and however you connect to food and farms, you can absolutely do both. That work you do every day on the ground, in the field, and thinking about the larger system and trying to improve the policies that shape it. We'll focus today on federal policy issues, but these steps we're going to go through are relevant even if you're thinking or working at the local or state level. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Gabrielle for our first poll. And again, and Gabrielle, this is just the text slide, and then let me know when you want me to switch to the poll.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So the first poll is to get a gauge of where everyone is in terms of actually contacting their member of Congress. So the question is, have you ever contacted your member of Congress in any of these ways? Have you met with your legislator and or their staff? Have you called your legislator? Have you sent an email or a letter? Have you signed a petition of support? Have you followed your legislator on social media, email, or paid attention to what they do? Have you attended a town hall meeting or another public event where your legislator spoke? Or you've never done any of this, but you'd like to? So, Sarah, if you can flip the slide.
Yep, and apologies, guys, for those question marks. It looks like the formatting for the apostrophe didn't come through. But the poll is in front. You can go ahead and take it. We want to give folks another maybe 10 seconds or so to take the poll. All right, you ready for the results? All right, there we go. So what do we think about that, Gabrielle?
I actually cannot see the results.
Oh, no, is it not showing them for you?
No.
I'm sorry, it is. It looks like other folks are saying they're not seeing the results. They are showing up for me. Oh, here, let me try this. How about that? Do you see them now?
Yes, perfect.
Great. And we are getting some responses. It looks like some folks are saying their responses are not picking up, that they marked more boxes than are showing up. So apologies for that. I'm not sure what could be going on, but we can at least talk about our results, and I have a few folks in the chat box who want to say, hey, I did do some of those things. Yeah, it says it's not, it looks like it's not calculating the responses, as several people are saying they selected. And I don't know what happened. Well, darn. I guess should we keep moving? I'm a little annoyed that the poll isn't working properly. Because I'm getting a number of folks, and thank you guys who are saying, hey, no, we have done these things. It sounds like the audience says, hey, we have, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe let's hope the others work a little better, huh?
Yeah, let's move on. But it looks like from the poll and from what people are saying in the chat box, a lot of you guys are really actively engaging your member of Congress.
Right on. Thanks for that.
And it's not a fake poll, it's just a faulty poll.
Yes, correct. All right, we'll keep moving. Hopefully the next one will work better. Apologies about that, folks. Best laid plans. All right, well, let's jump right in. So like I said at the beginning, we're going to break this down into a couple of key categories when we think about advocacy. And the first is listening and learning. After that, we'll talk about educating, and then we'll talk about asking and taking actions. But I like to start with listen and learn because you can get a lot done here. So let's jump into it. First off, probably most of you know this, but let us never assume. You always want to start, when you're thinking about advocacy, with understanding who represents you. The people who represent you in Congress, every single one of you has 2 senators and 1 representative. I like to use the website called GovTrack. You can see the link on your screen right there to find out who represents me. It's also a great website to help you begin to listen. Just what are those folks who represent me in D.C. doing? What are they supporting and opposing? You can check the ways to do that. You can check out their own website. You can sign up for their email newsletter. You can follow them on Facebook and or Twitter. And really valuably, on that awesome GovTrack website, you can see recently sponsored bills organized by issue area. You can see their voting record. You can see which committees they sit on, and a whole lot more. It's a really valuable tool if you're just getting started and wanting to understand who the people in Congress are who represent you. And if you know that, but maybe you haven't thought about, well, gee, do they have a voice on ag? Do they care about ag? This is a good place to start, too. You can look to see, have they recently sponsored a bill? Maybe they sit on a key committee. Something good to know is every single member of Congress in the Senate and the House sits on at least one, if not several, sort of committees of jurisdiction. Those are committees that focus on a certain subset of federal policy. That includes, there are committees in Senate and House for agriculture issues. The info that you find, it could be really awesome and heartening. Wow, this person is great. It may also be disappointing. Maybe they don't have much on your issues, or they seem to disagree with you a lot. That's a bummer, but it's way better to know this in advance and to plan for it and to work with it in your advocacy. Please don't be intimidated or put off if it looks like your member doesn't agree with you or doesn't have much on the record. If anything, this gives you even greater opportunity to try and influence them and get more support for the issues you care about. Quick little bit of context for your members of Congress's life. This is kind of what a lot of us think that members of Congress are doing in D.C. all day, just sitting at their desk, twiddling their thumbs. Doesn't seem like a lot's going on, right? This is probably a more accurate picture of what's going on inside their heads and their staffers' heads at all times. While it may seem like they're not getting a lot done on the outside, The Senate and the House are hives of activity. A single senator can have up to 40 staff members, multiple offices in their home state, and they are going to be tracking a full array of issue areas, not just agriculture. Again, they sit on several committees, sometimes also caucuses or working groups, and they're dividing their time between DC and their home state. What this means in practical terms is that the amount of time or brain space they give to food and ag issues simply may not be much. They do, however, all have someone on their team whose job it is to focus on ag for them, to be the kind of point person on the whole array of ag policy and help them set their positions. Even that, though, if you can imagine, is a pretty tall order. Think about how complex food and ag issues are. For one person to really understand crop insurance, food stamps and SNAP, food access, sustainable issues, conservation, organics, that's a lot of complexity and nuance for one person to hold. So as you can imagine, what that means is a lot of times their information and their knowledge is a mile wide and an inch deep. This is where we have a big role to play. A couple other things to know before you even contact an office. They are high traffic, busy places. They are also high turnover places. So there's not a lot of depth of knowledge always, and there's quite a lot of churn. That saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's definitely the case here. These offices are busy. They reward persistence and folks with whom they have a relationship. We're going to talk more about how to build that relationship in a few minutes. Awesome. And just a quick refresher from last time. Again, this will be familiar to folks who joined before. I just want to give you a quick thing. So if we're thinking about the Farm Bill, who are kind of the key players in that Farm Bill process? Who are the folks who matter the most? What you see on the list is basically the body of people who will influence it. Those congressional committees I mentioned, the House Committee on Ag, Senate Committee on Ag, appropriators, so separate appropriations committees who make some agriculture funding decisions, the full Congress, the President, advocacy groups, of course industry lobbyists, and folks like you. But really, when we think about who carries the bulk of the water, who does the most work, I've just highlighted them here for you. These are the two. When we think about who has the most impact, this is it. Members of Congress who sit on these two committees. So what does that mean for that means these people have the greatest influence. Guess what? That means everyone will be trying to influence them. Who has the best chance of doing that? That is folks who live and work in the places that they represent. So to help you out, let's take a look now. What does that mean for the South? Who are those key committee members in the Southern region? And I'm not sure. Can you see, Gabrielle, the key legislators slide, or is it still stuck on key players for you?
It's still stuck on key players.
All right, let's see if we can get that to go forward. Sorry, guys, it's not our day on the technology front. It is not cooperating here. So if I need to, I'm just going to share my screen with you so you can do it. Is it still stuck for you?
Yeah.
Hey, folks, apologies for this. Gabrielle, I just granted you control of my desktop. Do you see, are you able to see the screen and advance the slide?
No, it's stuck for me as well.
Well, that's exciting. Can you grant control back to me if you don't mind? If you can control click on my name in the thing. Apologies, guys. This has not happened to us before. Are you able to hand me the controls back so I can Try it again.
I just did. Did it go through?
It is not. Nope, it is not. Well, this is not good. Really sorry, folks. Hang with us for a second. We're going to try to get this figured out. Yeah, it's not giving me any sort of access here. It's really frustrating. And so can you, yeah, so oh, here we go. Let's try this. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not letting me, oh boy. Well, folks, we are definitely having some tech issues. Hang with us for a second. We'll try to get it fixed. If we can't get it fixed.
Oh, wait.
Whoop.
It looks like it did advance.
Okay, great. Now I just got to get the controls back. I'm glad to hear that. I just can't get the controls back. Give me a second. I'll try an emergency other tactic. Don't know. Yeah, I don't know what else I can, it's just not giving, it's not a, are you sure you, yeah, it is definitely not. Yeah, it's just not letting me see the screen anymore. At all. Well, thanks. Hang on for a second, folks. We'll try to get it figured out. I'm so sorry this is happening. Don't know what the deal is. I'm going to try one more technique here, and if this doesn't do it, we may have to figure out an alternate setup here. Never had this happen before. We're trying a new setup. Oh, all right. I see it, and we got it. I think we're back in business. Gabrielle, can you still hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. Well, let's get moving. So sorry, guys. I have no idea what the problem is, but we're going to try to make up a little time and keep rolling. So let's talk about it. We just talked about ag committees in the House and the Senate. And if you live in the South, here's your cheat sheet. Here's your list of folks across the region in the South who sit on either the House Agriculture Committee, the Senate Agriculture Committee, or an Appropriations Committee that gets to make agriculture funding decisions. I'd also like, and again, you don't feel the need to write this down. We'll send you the slides afterward, and as well as the recording. But just so you know, these are your folks. And I also want to show you on a map. I know I'm a visual person. In case it's helpful to you, here's a map of what that looks like on the Senate side in terms of senators on the Ag Committee or Ag Appropriations Committee. And here again, is it on the House side? And again, we'll share these slides with you, so feel free to grab them from when we send them out if you'd like to have these as a reference. Couple frequently asked questions. People often ask us, okay, this is cool, but none of those are my representatives. What do I do? We'll talk about that. Can I contact folks who are outside of my state? It's generally not a great idea. We generally encourage folks, when you're thinking about advocacy, to focus on the members of Congress who represent you. That's who they are most attuned to. They don't love hearing from people who are out of their district or out of their state. What if you're a nonprofit and you're based in a different district, but you do work or you have members or projects in that other district? That is 100% great. Awesome. All right, well, let's keep rolling. We'll try to make up a little time. All right, so you've done your listening, you've done your learning, you've got your feet under you, you're like, I know what's going on, I'm ready to talk to these people. We've got a quick poll for you from Gabrielle, and then we'll jump right in. And let's hope the poll works this time.
Yes. Okay. So our next poll question is, and this one is a trick question, I like to say. So you have a meeting set up with your member of Congress, and he or she cancels and offers a a staff person to meet with instead. Do you, A, cancel this meeting with the staffer? Do you continue to meet with the staffer, or do you just do nothing? And I will give you a hint, doing nothing is not a good solution.
All right, we'll give you about 10 more seconds to make your choice, and then we'll talk about it for a minute. All right, let's see those results. I think this one is accurate.
I think so too.
Awesome. Is there anything that you'd like to share on this one, Gabrielle, or thoughts from your perspective?
I think that we have a really astute group in front of us. And yeah, because 95% of you get it. And it's important that you meet with the staffer, because with some offices, the staffers actually make the decision. And just to give you an example, when I worked as a staffer in Capitol Hill, we worked together to put a legislative agenda together for the member of Congress. So all of the different staffers will come together and basically give their input from the meetings that they had with constituents. And that would go on to a 1 to 2 pager that the chief legislative person would submit to the member of Congress. And we pretty much did that once a week. And so that meant that the power pretty much rested with us, because by the time it got to the member of Congress, she was just like, okay, this is the direction we're going to go in, unless there was something near and dear to her heart and she might have a few questions. But for the most part, she trusted the information that we gave her. So those of you who said meet with the staffer, excellent decision, because at that point you might be able to have some type of negotiation power that you might not get with the member of Congress.
True story. All of that. She speaks the truth. Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about, thank you, Gabrielle. Let's talk a little bit about educating. And you'll notice here that we are liberal with the use of both MOC, which stands for Member of Congress, and with the word staff. So these actions are all super valuable for both the member and really, as Gabrielle said, the staffer. The staffer is your new friend. So we like to call educating your members the 4 S's. These are 4 things that you can do no matter your position, your role, whether or not your organization is comfortable advocating. These are all things you can do in some capacity. Shake hands. Introduce yourself to anybody you meet who works with the member of Congress. Every single member has a field office. Usually folks in the House have 1, maybe 2. Folks in the Senate could have up to 4. There's likely 1 near you. Get to know those folks. Their job is to be the eyes and ears on the ground. Their job is to shake a lot of hands. Make sure they're shaking yours. Send invites. Get in the habit. Maybe you do field days, you do fundraisers, you do farmers market, educational opportunities. Invite members of Congress and their staff to those events. They may or may not come. It can be a little tough to get them to show up, but here's what sending the invite does. It gets you on their radar. It starts to build their awareness of the work you're doing and why it's of value. Share news. Did you win a grant? Were you awarded some sort of really awesome award? Share the news with them. It's great. Again, what we're trying to do here is build their awareness of what you're doing, why it's important, and the issues you care about. Finally, show up. Attend those town halls. Some folks like to do telephone town halls. Listening sessions, coffee chats. We'll also talk a little bit more about what we call in-district meetings. Basically, when we think about educating, a lot of times people think, oh, I just need to write a report and send it over, or like I have to do a long, complicated education process. Definitely not. These are all things you can integrate into your daily work, into the daily work that you do no matter what your role is, that can really help build members of Congress's understanding of the issues and really prime them to be good to advocate for the work we care about. All right, so we've done some learning, we've done a lot of listening, we've done a bunch of educating. You're going to find that once you start engaging with staffers and with members of Congress, they start to kind of get informed up on the issues. The next thing they're going to ask you is, so what can I do to help? What do you want from me? Members of Congress will say this. The public will say this too. That's a really good sign, but then you have to actually know how to answer that question. Just what can they do? Just what do we hope that our members of Congress are going to do for us in D.C.? How do you make that ask? Let's talk about it. And just to let you know how it's going to go, I'm going to kind of walk through what we consider kind of the 3 golden rules of advocacy. And they're effective whether you're simply one person making one call or maybe you're doing this full time. We'll do for each some specific examples as well. These are golden rules that we use here at NSAC every day when we think about how we build a big campaign. But again, they're just as relevant if you're a regular person and you're looking to be effective. First one, golden rule, have an ask. What does that mean? I call it know thy problem and thy solution. You know how frustrating it can be when there's a newborn baby and they're crying and you're not sure, is she hungry? Does she need to be changed? Does she need a nap? I'm not sure. You know she's crying and you want to help, but you don't know what she needs? That's kind of how your member of Congress feels when you come, when they get a bunch of calls and people are complaining and they don't attach an ask. So very first thing is know what you want, know what the problem is, and have a solution. An example of an ask is, I would like you to vote no on this bill, or I would like you to sponsor this piece of legislation. Or it could be broad. I would like you to support organics in the Farm Bill. Anything that is an ask. Second golden rule, be sure to ask the right person or entity. We also call this don't ask a dairy cow to pull a plow. In a real emergency situation, you could potentially get a dairy cow to pull a plow, just as in an emergency situation, the White House sort of has some influence over some things, and you could big a big campaign and make a bunch of calls into the White House on the Farm Bill, but you're really kind of barking up the wrong tree. So think about who has the ability to make the change that I'm asking for. It'll really help you be heard if your ask gets to the right person. And when we're talking federal policy, most of the time, the right person is going to be your senators and your representative. That is especially true now when we're getting ready to rewrite the Farm Bill. Once the Farm Bill has been passed into law and it moves over to implementation at USDA, sometimes then the right person is federal employees at USDA or key decision makers at USDA. But for most of our work, for right now, it's likely to be members of Congress. Third golden rule, and you know what, I missed some basic math. There are 4, not 3, so apologies. But here's number 3. Make your ask memorable. What does that mean? I like to say stories are where it's at. Human beings are narrative creatures. What hooks us, what makes things memorable for us is a story. What I mean by that is if you're asking for something, you want to always give it a connection back to home. I mean, how many of you, have started to read, a long report and then just put it down and be like, oh, this did not capture my interest? Or you hear a bunch of statistics and you think, wow, that's valuable, but then they just kind of disappear out of your head a few hours later. That's you and everybody else in the world. Now, data are useful. Numbers are useful, and they can help you build a case. What will carry your ask, what will really stick with your member of Congress and his or her staffers are stories, and linking those stories to home and to values that you share. I love to tell a story about a woman who came to D.C. a year or 2 ago to testify about the value of farm to school in the South. She had all these great numbers about these are the students on free and reduced lunch, these are the numbers on the need in our community, on kind of the farm community. And she kind of rattled off some numbers in her student population. But what captivated people and what her member of Congress followed up on later and remembered were some stories. She told this amazing story of a grocery store produce manager who called her up one day, a couple days after they had done a local food feature in the school, and said, "Can you please let me know when you're going to do that again? Because I need to pre-stock my store. The kids were showing up with their parents, and we didn't have that produce item in stock. I would love to know ahead of time what's coming in so I can stock it up." That story really perked up people's ears. They remembered it. They asked questions about it. It wasn't, oh, the demand is X, or we sold X boxes of carrots, but this person in this community was impacted by it, and it kind of made it just stuck with people. And 2 or 3 years later, it still stuck with me. So when you have an ask, link it to a story. Final rule: amplify your ask. This is basically the definition of organizing right here, and it's a little bit of a multi-part one. But these are the kind of core pieces when we think of. When we say you want to think, one person speaking up, that's great. That can be really, really, really powerful. But what helps is more than one person speaking up, is amplifying that person's voice. The 3 kind of best ways to do that are, first, people power, a.k.a. getting more folks taking action, more folks speaking up. Think about all the recent efforts, folks organizing call-in days to the Hill and to Congress. One call, they're like, okay, that's useful. 500 calls, they're not getting anything done all day. They get the message that you care. The second one is relationships. This one isn't always clear, but effectively it's people like to help their friends. This doesn't have to mean a bunch of kind of fat cats in a back room greasing the wheels and making insider deals. It's also about knowing, who does your member of Congress care about? Where do they have relationships? And can you tap into those relationships to make sure your ask is heard? I have a great example. We work with some great farmers in the Midwest who happen to go to church with a prominent Midwestern senator. Now, they didn't choose that church because of this. They just have both been longtime church members. Now, it would be rude for that farmer to go right up after church and say, and put the senator on the spot rudely. But what they can do is they can bring up the topic. They can kind of say, oh, hey, how's things going in D.C.? Do you have any updates on this issue? I'd really love to show you on my farm sometime how valuable a certain program has been for me, or why an issue is important. And that stuff starts to pay off. That's an example of using a relationship to get your issue in front of folks. And the last one is called daylight. This is, in essence, the power of the press, of the media, of getting a little bit of publicity and transparency on your issue. Any way that you can get exposure is a good thing. Members of Congress, I'll give you a pro tip, they respond to both positive and negative publicity. Both of those are tools you can consider when you're trying to increase daylight on an issue. Positive is great. If everybody likes to be praised, if a member does something right, if they say yes to your ask, thank them. Encourage them. Say, awesome, great, let's do that some more. More may come on from that positive press. And negative is a tool we use pretty carefully. We try not to use it unless we really need to. But it is true that if a member of Congress is receiving some bad exposure for not saying yes or for saying no, for not doing what folks back home want them to do, that can help nudge them towards making a different decision. All right, and we have one more poll. We're going to try again with the polls and see if we can get this thing to work. Gabrielle, hand it over to you.
So this poll is to really emphasize what Sarah just explained about amplifying your ask. So have you ever, or your organization, ever worked with a national organization on legislation by signing a petition, attending a town hall meeting with an organized group, participating in a DC or state-based lobby day or fly-in, or any other way that you might have worked with a national organization that you want to share?
All right. Here's hoping our poll works.
It looks like it's working.
I hope so. Hooray. We'll give folks just a few more seconds, and then we'll close it and talk about it for a bit.
And those of you who put other, if you don't mind sharing what that other is in the chat box, that would be great.
All right. I think we're going to close out the poll in just a few seconds. Great. Let's check out those results. Awesome. You guys have been busy. Anything that you would like to share, Gabrielle, or any reflections on these results?
It looks like we have a very astute group here.
We do.
And thank you for sharing, Charity. She works organizing calls to action, letter writing, and call-in campaigns.
Awesome. And these really are all great examples of that fourth piece of amplifying an ask, of saying, well, this is a value to me, and I want to do it with others and get more attention and more action on the issue. Anything else, Gabrielle, before we jump on the next slide?
No. Anyone else would anyone else like to share what their other was? Okay, well, I guess we can move forward to the next slide.
Awesome. Great. So just a quick recap, and then we're going to get into some nuts and bolts of what do specific actions look like. So to be an effective advocate, you want to be listening to and understanding what your member of Congress is all about. You want to be doing that ongoing education work of keeping them on your radar, keeping them aware of what's going on and what matters. And then when you're ready to make the ask, this is the best way to do it. Have a specific ask. What can they do to help? Make sure you're asking the right person. How does this person have a say? Make that ask memorable. What's the real world connection? What's the story? Where's the heart of it? And finally, how can you amplify it? Can you get more people there? Can you get some key relationships tapped in? And can you get some daylight on the issue? With those four pieces, that right there is the bones of anybody's sort of campaign action plan, whether it is I'm making a quick call and I want to make sure I have an ask, I'm calling the right office, I include my story, and I ask two other people to call, or it could be the bones of an entire campaign, that right there. Awesome. So let's get into some nuts and bolts on things you can do this year and next year on the Farm Bill. And thanks to one of our NSAC members for this great photo that you're seeing of the ranking member, so the top ranking Democrat on the House Agriculture Committee, Colin Peterson, with a bunch of farmers from the Land Stewardship Project. They are really good at getting action. All right, let's put these rules to work. What does this look like, nuts and bolts, in your daily life? Let me first note, anything you can do is helpful. Please don't beat yourself up if you feel like I'm really busy, I'm having a hard time finding time for this. There's no silver bullet. There's no quick fix in advocacy. It takes all of us doing what we can when we can. And what does it mean to win? Sometimes we win support. We win really big things like increased funding or a key reform. Sometimes we just win by staving off bad things, by staving off cuts or avoiding bad policy changes. And sometimes we win by fighting off opposition. These are just there's a lot of ways to win. And let's talk about the actions that can help get us there. I'm going to talk about it in three contexts. First, I'm really busy. I've got about 90 seconds. What's the most effective use of my time? Secondly, I can put in a little more time than that. How can I do that? And finally, I'm really interested in doing this regularly. Kind of what's the best practices? Where should organizations and institutions be going? So I've got 90 seconds. What can I do? Here's your rubric for making a decision about what's worth your very limited time. First and foremost, get to know and get on some email lists and some action lists of organizations you know and trust. Those are the folks who are going to be the best equipped to be alert to issues, aware of what's going on, and issuing kind of clear, actionable opportunities for you. So let's say you get one of those emails in and you're on your lunch break at work and you say, okay, is this worth my time? Is their ask clear? Have they articulated, here's what's going on, here's what we need to do? Is there a clear target? Have they said, your member sits on a key committee, or here's the reason we're reaching this person? Will your action contribute to amplifying the issue? Will it, here's a great example, calling your legislator. If you take one thing home today, it's that if you're a really busy person and you want to make sure your limited time is useful, one of the easiest and fastest things you can do is simply get comfortable picking up your phone and calling your member of Congress's office. It's really fast. It takes generally only about 90 seconds. It's generally pretty easy. Their number in DC is publicly available, and they have staff whose job it is to take your calls and be polite, staffing that every single day during East Coast business hours. And it's straightforward. You can share a simple, direct message with the person on the phone and be done. You don't have to have a long conversation. You just have to register your ask. Emails, people often ask us, well, which is most effective? Is it a petition? Is it email? Calls are by far more heavily weighted than petitions or emails or social media. That said, the last few months we've seen a real uptick in people making calls. This is a good thing. It can mean that at times it's hard to get through, so please don't let that deter you. On agriculture issues, it's pretty rare that agriculture issues flood the lines. So while an issue like healthcare may generate hundreds and hundreds of calls, even as few as 5 or 6 calls on an agriculture issue would be considered a lot and can be really helpful. So if you're busy and you need to have just a quick hit on what to do, this is your way. All right, you ready to step up your game? You say, okay, I've already got that. Duh, I already know how to make calls. I'm on it. Let's talk about stepping up your game. So just a quick anecdote here. A lot of us sometimes can feel, that feeling of incredulity when, let's say you've been putting on an event. Let's say you're putting on a movie showing for your organization, and you thought you did an awesome job promoting it. You did posters. You did Facebook. You got a news blurb in the paper. You were everywhere, only to have a friend tell you later, the day after the event, oh, well, shoot, I would have loved to go if I'd have heard about it. I'm sure that many of you have probably been there. I certainly have. Think of your legislators as that friend. They are real people over there. They are just as susceptible to biases, ignorance, and mistakes, and just being plain overwhelmed as the rest of us. They also, like us, need to hear a lot about something for it to stick. And they tend to focus on what they know. Their staffers are the same way. If your member of Congress doesn't know that there are sustainable farmers in their district, that your local nonprofit is doing awesome food access work, then they're a lot less likely to act to help you. So here's what you can do to make that happen. You can emphasize those 4 S's around education: shaking hands, sending invites, sharing news, and showing up. And you can add the ask. Here's an example. Let's say you're doing a farmer's market tomato taste testing. The district field staffer shows up because you invited them. That will be a great opportunity to make sure they understand where the funding for that event came from. Maybe you have a federal grant to help fund some of your farmer's market work. If that's the case, you can ask them, hey, will you support this program in the next Farm Bill? Look at the great work it's doing on the ground. Other ways to step up your game: link up with local and national groups working on the issues you care about. This is the Amplify message. Join those call-in days, those sign-on letters, and opportunities to put yourself into a group where more people are taking action. Third way to step things up is to step up and be a sharer or an amplifier on social media. This works if you're an individual or an organization. Social media action and sort of the notion of something going viral depends on people sharing it. Be that person to help amplify or boost the kinds of messages that you want to see on the issues you care about. And I'll just add to one other thing that I didn't put on that list that I just want to mention real quick is relationships. Is just the key, the sort of step from I'm an occasional person who works on this to I really want to put in some time, is starting to build a relationship with and to get to know some of the folks who work for your member of Congress. And how do you do that? You focus on those 4 S's, you join their mailing list, and also, frankly, you can just stop by the field office and say hello. They're open to the public. You could just stop in, leave a card, say I'd love to chat sometime. Don't be afraid to do that, to step in and to say, hey, I'd like to say hello. What you're doing is important, and it's really valuable. Think of it this way. You're also doing a service for them. You're helping that person understand better what's going on back home. That's a benefit for them, too. All right, so, okay, you got some basics. You're ready to step up your game. Let's talk a little bit about best practices for folks when we think about our most effective groups or the people who are really, truly doing the work all the time and often. The first thing, and it is super, super important, and probably the one word you need for doing this work regularly and being a super champion at it is coordination. Doing the work to check in with others who care, to try and link up your efforts to really, really, truly get everybody on the same page and everybody pulling in the same direction. Corollaries to that are stepping up on your listening game, which we'll talk more about in a minute, and the importance of allyship. If you're already kind of doing what you need to do on your issues, consider expanding your circle. Consider saying, who else is not at the table who I can bring to the table? Are there issues that we haven't thought about or that we haven't acted on that we could or should that are related? How can we be better allies to people who may not have the relationships that we do? Next section here in the terms of, there we go. So stepping up your listening game and your communication game. Again, these are some of the things that our most effective groups do. They get in the habit of requesting meetings with their members. I'll tell you up front, it can take a long time for a member to say yes, but you got to start somewhere. We call them in-district meetings. Every single member of Congress is back home a couple times a year. Sometimes, depends on their temperament. Some of them do public events all the time, others very few. That's part of listening and getting to know them, is to find out what's their preference. But if they do events, if they are home, you can, in addition to showing up to a town hall, you can request a meeting yourself. We call those in-districts. They are guaranteed to set up a few every time they're home, and we want you to be able to be on their list. If you're interested in learning more about that, or you're curious how to get that ball rolling, we'd love to talk to folks one-on-one. We have some sort of extra resources on that, so please feel free to follow up if that's of interest to you. Another thing, folks, come to DC. If you happen to be passing through, maybe you're here for a conference, or maybe you're a farmer and you've got a story you'd like to tell, we always love to help folks get heard here in DC. Every single member of Congress has an open office here in DC. If you're a constituent, you can walk right in and say hello. Maybe you can say, hey, I'd love to meet with someone who's available to make an ask on the Farm Bill or to share my story. They say yes to that. We can help you do that too. And again, let's just check in real quick. Improving or upping your listening game. This is something, again, when it goes from, hey, I'm amplifying some asks of my organization or sort of a trusted partner, consider thinking about and formalizing and improving the way that you reach out and listen in your community. Maybe it's time for a policy advisory group or for some ongoing education with your board or with leaders or with folks you communicate with. Maybe you're a farmer and you just want to consider getting organized with some other farmers to check in. What are our shared needs? Are we being heard? Like, who can we be sharing this with? That is really key work. And again, like I said before, don't ever assume that someone's doing that for you. It is our shared responsibility and our shared opportunity. The last piece of advice I'll give you before we jump into the last section is there's a rule that we have here in DC, which is that we never, ever, 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 ever assume or have the opportunity to assume that one ask, one contact is enough for a member of Congress to care and to actually put their political capital behind an issue. It never happens with one contact. It takes lots. So everything you've seen on these lists is an all of the above situation. A call is great. Following up with an email is better. Getting 5 more friends to call is great. Coordinating with 5 other groups to do a call-in day, now you're talking. So think of them as additive. Think of them as like every action helps. The more of them we achieve, the more close we get to victory. Okay, let's get a little bit of, I want to get into some Farm Bill nuts and bolts, which I know we weren't saying we're going to do a ton of, but I do think they're important, and we're at 4 o'clock, so we'll try to wrap up here in the next few minutes and go a little over for questions since we ran just a bit behind due to our technical challenges. So here's a quick refresher for you. If you're familiar with the old how a bill becomes a law, this won't look too unfamiliar, but in essence what you're seeing in front of you is a very simplified version of how a bill becomes a law. Every single one starts in the ag committees, totally separate bills written by totally separate people. Once it goes, the ag committees have a chance to work together on drafting it. They amend it within the committee, and then if all goes well, they'll vote on it and they'll report it out. They'll vote on it, and if it's got enough votes, it's reported out to the floor. Then it waits for floor time. If leadership gives it floor time, every single member of Congress will have a chance to weigh in, to debate the bill, to amend it, and vote on it. If it's voted off the floor, if it has enough votes to pass, once you get 2 bills, the Senate bill and the House bill, they have to combine them because, as you can imagine, we can't have 2 contradictory laws. We've got to have one. So they combine them in what's called the conference committee. And then that final combined bill, which contains components of both, has to go and be approved one more time by the floor of the House and the Senate before it goes on to the White House. So I put this up here. Why are we putting this up here? To talk about now, and that's because I want you to understand, one, sort of when and how your actions can be helpful. This is also super relevant because some people may not have somebody who sits on one of those ag committees, and you may be thinking, well, how can I be helpful, or what can someone do if they're not in an ag committee area? There are definitely things you can do. So first and foremost, let's talk for a minute about the ag committees. If your member of Congress sits on an ag committee, they are the most influential people. Anything you can do to reach them with an ask is a good thing. If you don't have one of those members, you can still take action, and we'll talk more about this for the next few minutes, but I'll talk about it here in the context of this timing. First, the floor. Now remember I just said every single member gets a chance to weigh in. Now those folks, they haven't spent months and months writing a bill like the committees have. Their knowledge is not going to be as deep. That means it can sometimes be easier to influence them. Maybe this is a chance to, one, educate them about important amendments. Let's say, for example, in the let's say the House Farm Bill includes some cuts to a program that we support. We could work, maybe in D.C. we're working on an amendment to reverse those cuts. Someone without an ag committee member could absolutely call and ask their member of Congress to support that good amendment to make a positive change in the bill. So when we hit floor time, every single person has a say. But when will we have floor time? It could be anywhere. You'll see some rough timing there in front of us. Could be most likely next spring or summer. What about now? What can I do now? Glad you asked. Let's talk about that too. So let me move on to my next slide, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. So action opportunities that are really valuable, first, for everyone. No matter who your member of Congress is, we want them to be educated about sustainable ag issues. What are the successes locally? How does policy impact those? Are there challenges you face? This is always relevant and always helpful. It's helpful if they're on committee because they're going to use that information to make good decisions. It's helpful if they're off committee because, here's the key piece, that can help us build support for issues. I want to introduce another jargon term here that you're probably going to hear a lot the next few months, and that's called marker bills. So something that happens in the run-up to a new farm bill is that every member of Congress has ideas. They get excited. They want to be seen as the champion back home. They introduce what are called marker bills. They're simply, just think of them as sort of a package of ideas dropped into this sort of big churn, this big marketplace of ideas. A member of Congress may introduce 3 or 4 marker bills. It's a trial balloon. It's them saying, hey, I care about organic research. I want to work on organic research in the Farm Bill. Who supports me? Who's with me? All of you, any member of Congress, Democrat or Republican, can sign on to co-sponsor a marker bill that's been introduced in their chamber. So a member of the House can sign on to a House marker bill. This is a great thing. This helps to signal to the Congress, oh wow, there's 100 members on that organic agriculture research bill. How cool is that? That signals to them there's a lot of support for the issue. That increases the chances that the Ag Committee will include that marker bill content in the actual bill. So that's a great example of what someone can do, whether or not they're on committee, is every member of Congress can sign on to marker bills and help shape that marketplace of ideas before the bill is written. Now you're saying, well, are there any marker bills? Can I support any? What's coming on? They are all starting to be introduced this fall. Groups like NSAC and Southern SAWG are a really great source for you. As those bills are introduced, we'll be sharing those opportunities in the months to come, and everyone will have an opportunity to weigh in. And then just a couple more things on what you can be doing right now. Let's talk again. I know we've used the word amplify a lot, but let's talk for one more minute about amplifying your asks. So as of right now, what can everyone be doing? You can be educating folks about what's important. You can be helping build support for key issue areas. And you can be helping us rally voices to speak out for the things we want to see in the next Farm Bill. Again, in committee, if you are lucky enough to have a member of Congress on committee, you really get an awesome opportunity. Everything is fair game for them. But again, remember, that's only if they're your member. But throughout the whole process, these are ways to amplify that issue work and to help build support. You may see sign-on letters coming around. If you're an individual, that's a petition. It's fine to sign it. If you're an organization, a lot of people will try to build support for a marker bill or an idea by doing an organizational sign-on. You can sign your organization on. Help us build up some energy and some action behind the bill or the issue you care about. You can speak to the press when reporters call you, or if you have an opportunity to talk to a reporter, say, hey, we're thinking about the Farm Bill. We really want to see more support for beginning farmers in it. Get that news out in the press. And then really importantly, are there ways you can give others the opportunity to be part of it? Maybe you're a farmer with the CSA list. Maybe you want to share that call to action from your local organization when it comes out with your CSA folks. Not to say you have to do it, but say, hey, if you care about this kind of farming, here's an opportunity to foster more of it. And then the last thing I'll mention here, and then I want to leave us some time for Q&A, is timing. Timing is everything. You hear me saying, hey, marker bills are coming. It will be an opportunity. What I would love to be able to do today is to say, marker bills are here. Here are 15. Go forth and make your asks. The political process, alas, is not as tidy as we'd wish. They're on their way. You are likely to start seeing updates about them in the next few months. So hopefully today, some of these action guidelines give you some ideas for how you're going to act when that time is coming. In the meantime, education is great. Spreading issue awareness is great. Doing that groundwork of getting to know your members and your members of Congress and what they care about is great. The further along we get in the Farm Bill process, it can get a little harder to influence the bill in a big way. But I do want to affirm to you, you remember that timeline. Now through next September is our kind of key window for rewriting the bill. We have a chance at every single phase of that process to make that bill better and to use that bill as an opportunity to advance a more sustainable food and farm system. So every single phase is going to be an opportunity. I also put a few key dates for you here. These are what we call likely recess periods. Members of Congress go back home at certain times of the year to do some fundraising, to connect with their community, to be home for the holidays. They are great times for you to look at, hey, have they put on their Facebook page any public events? Hey, are they holding a town hall, or is there an opportunity for me to be heard? You can, these on 2017 are set. They're pretty formalized at this point. There are likely, I also put the likely ones for early 2018, just so you can kind of have those in your back pocket. In essence, the shorthand way to know when the recesses are is if there's a federal holiday, Congress is likely to take a week off around it, and they're always home for a full month in August. That's your shorthand. But in essence, for all of this, what I hope you most take away from today is that you have a role. There's a whole lot you can do, whether you have 90 seconds, whether you have a full-time career, and there's a lot to do no matter where you are or what your comfort level is. The education work is key. The learning work is key. The asking is great, and that really great work of amplifying it, of stepping it up, and of bringing more people in is so, so important. Anything and everything you can do to advance any and all of those will help us get there together. And so with that, I want to just flag real quick. And Gabrielle, did you want to make a quick plug for keeping this conversation going at PCAN before we take questions?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So SSAWG has a policy collaborative action network, and more affectionately known as PCAN. And we have a quarterly meeting, and our last quarterly meeting we're actually pushing back to November, and it will be November 14th. And our agendas are based on what you tell us you want to discuss. And our goal is to make sure you know what's going on a national level, the state levels, and local levels. And, of course, anything else that you might want to discuss. So if you are interested, please email us at policy@southernsawg.org. And, again, our next meeting, which will be a conference call, will be on November 14th, and that's from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Gabrielle. All right, and so we can stay on the line for another 15 minutes or so. If anybody has any questions, we'd love to hear them. And just feel free if you have questions to type them in the chat box, and we'd be happy to talk about it. And one thing, I think I did partially answer this question earlier, but we have a question someone's interested in. If I don't have a member on the Ag Committee, what should we be concentrating on locally? That's a great question, and I think the take-home is anybody, even if they're not on the Ag Committee, can be supportive of an issue area or an ask. When we have marker bills introduced, when you see an opportunity, it's great even for off-committee folks to co-sponsor those bills. So a good local action would be organizing to put some pressure on a member to co-sponsor a bill on an issue that matters to you. In addition to that, educating them on Farm Bill issues that are important is super helpful right now. Even if they're not on committee, it would be really good for them to know, hey, by the way, did you know these are the needs that our farm community has here? Did you know this is what SNAP use is like and why it's so critical here? We want you to be informed so that you can help make good decisions during the Farm Bill process when the bill goes to the floor. That is also a really great thing to do. Those are just two examples. There's a lot more, but that's at least a start. Next question, what are the odds of increasing membership? Okay, so someone's asking about, how does one increase the number of members of Congress from a certain state on the committee? That is a pretty political process, but the membership does shift a bit every 2 years or so. So the committee membership is not going to change until 2019. The best way to get more members from your state onto an ag committee is to educate them about why ag is important and to ask them to get on that committee. You want them to see it as, and think about it this way, they want to make their mark, they want to have an impact for their state. Make the case to them, ag is important here. We want you to help us ensure that it stays important and that it's as sustainable and awesome as it could be. Education helps do that, and when the time comes in 2019, if you've done good educating work, you can make that ask. You can say, hey, you should ask for this. You should request to get on that committee. A couple other questions. Oh, great questions, you guys. Any ideas for how to keep the Farm Bill at top of mind? Members of Congress are easily distracted by fluff. You're not kidding. They are a little bit like goldfish that way. So how do we keep the Farm Bill at top of mind for people? Is we're persistent. Um, One, we're persistent, so we want to make sure that they're hearing about it regularly. The best way for it to cut through the noise is for it to be connected back to what's relevant locally. They always keep half an eyeball on home. Even if they're distracted by the news, by big major news and announcements and craziness, they keep half an eyeball on home, and they really truly want to know, what are you folks at home thinking about? What are you guys caring about? So linking Farm Bill to what's going on at home is one great way to do it. Another great way to do it is to get to know or to try to develop a relationship with some staffers, especially the staffer who focuses on agriculture. Again, every single member has one of them, usually based in their DC office, and it's their job to focus on ag. So they're going to be a little less distracted than the member of Congress, his or herself. So they are a great person to get to know and to stay in communication with. Next question, isn't NSAC releasing an overall platform sometime soon? Yes, it is. If you're curious at the big picture level, what's on the table, what are some marker bills that are coming in a few weeks. Actually, I think it'll be just a few days after our final Southern SAWG webinar. The NSAC is releasing its 2018 Farm Bill platform. So for those of you who want to see what's the big slate of issues that this coalition is working on, you can do so there. There will be other organizations doing similar things this fall. Other question, do we have a resource that we favor for sharing Farm Bill issues with elected officials or regular folks? We don't have a resource, but that's a really good question. Do we have a resource that we favor that makes it sort of possible to share Farm Bill issues with people? I don't know that we have a one-stop resource, but Natalie, that's a great question. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about that. And another question, how do you find out who's that ag staffer in DC? That is an excellent question. I'll tell you. So you will not find the name of an agriculture staffer on a website anywhere. However, what you can do is you can call their office. They do answer their phones in DC. You can say, hey, hi, my name is so-and-so. I work with local organization, and we really care a lot about ag issues. I'm hoping to share some resources, or I'm hoping to share some information with, Senator Bobo's agriculture staffer. Can you share that name with me? And you can ask for it on the phone. Most offices are going to give that to you. Or let's say you say, hey, we're doing an event and it's related to agriculture. Can you share with me the name of the staffer for agriculture that I should share it with? What they're probably not going to give, so that's the way to do it. Give the office a call and have a real reason that you want to have their name, and they'll often give it to you. Some offices can be a little touchy about that or a little bit harder to reach. In that case, you might start with the district staff. First stop in, meet the district staff, establish yourself as a real person and a constituent, and then ask them to make the connection between you and the DC staff. Those are two really sort of tried and true ways to do it. One thing I'll give you a heads up about is they are sensitive about that information being shared very, very publicly. So for example, you wouldn't want to share that email address and have 1,000 people email the staffer. That would be a really fast way to break that relationship. We want to be having calls going in, but calls go into the office, not to the staffer. And a really important, a key piece of relationships is you want to be able to push pressure on somebody and make sure they understand the issue, but you don't want to put them on, as they would say, to put them on blast. That is a really quick way to break a relationship and make it hard for your ask to be heard. Any other questions? These are all really great questions, folks. All right, well, I think everybody has finished up on questions, which is awesome. Thank you for asking such great ones. Anything else from you, Gabrielle, before we wrap things up?
No. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to having you on our next call.
Yes, please join us for our next one. It's going to be interactive. We're really excited to have a strategy discussion with you. And apologies again for the technical issues. Thanks for bearing with us through our poll error, which is all my fault, and also our tech issues. So thanks for sticking with us, and thanks for being part of the conversation. And we will see you all in just a few weeks. Thanks again.